Progress. Good morning, everybody, in person and on Zoom. Welcome to Contemporary Issues here on another dry December day in Colorado.
Dry and warm.
Dry and warm, yes. Someday it's going to cool down and snow, but not here, not today.
Santa Claus is gonna have to use a sleigh instead, or a wagon instead of a sleigh.
Santa Claus is going to use a wagon instead of a sleigh. Yeah, we're glad to have Jim and Jane with us today,
We're glad to be back.
who have ventured out now after vaccinating and boosting and probably back out into society. So we're glad to have you in person and hope you'll come back. But we're glad to have Zoom available too. Today, Ron Puning is going to do second part of two parts on the book by Fiona Hill about Rust Belt economics and populism. So we had a good discussion last week and going to wrap up this week. And so our usual announcements, please mute yourself in the lower left corner of your screen, Zoomers, and then unmute when you're going to talk. And we are recording today for future playback. And please be kind to our speaker and to each other, of course. And any other announcements? We have Sunday school class party. Yeah, our wives want us to announce that, of course, this coming
Sunday night,
a week from
11th.
tonight.
Yeah.
Yep, at the Galloway's house, and I'll send out a reminder about where that is again. And if anybody can come, just come and enjoy fellowship and discussion. Things in the news this week. Boy, the one I paid attention to was the parents getting charged in the case of the Detroit boy that shot up his high school. I don't know if this was the first case of parents actually getting charged for negligence, but it's got attention and hopefully will make parents think twice before they give their 15-year-old guns and no supervision in high school.
Unbelievable.
Incredible. And also the high school is under investigation for why they didn't do more with this kid also, but who knows how much liability they have for and how much they knew about a danger that this kid was. But that'll be a case to follow. We might even do another update on guns and the situation around the world today.
You don't hear in the news some discussion of the president issuing an executive order banning semi-automatic weapons.
About Biden issuing.
You know, a first-term president wouldn't do it because he knows he wouldn't be elected for a second term. And Biden, who we don't know whether he's going to run for second term or not, there seems to be some indications that he might.
Yeah.
But he might make a magnanimous move and call and issue an executive order knowing he's not going to be.
Oh, that's a good possibility.
Banning, because you know
And
some president has to have enough guts to do that because the Congress is owned by the gun lobbies.
Yes, right. Hope you Zoomers can hear. He's saying he's got his mask. Jim has his mask on, and it's Doug says we can't hear. Okay, good.
This
So
would be a plus at times.
Yes, I know the mask is good, but it kind of mutes us too.
Good.
What was
But just a
interesting
thought.
about that boy is that he got called into the principal's office with the
Yes.
drawings. So unlike some of these other ones, that one really, that shooting should, in my mind, should have happened. They
Yeah.
should have not have had that kid in school that day. And why didn't they search his backpack?
Well,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
even just send them home for the day.
I mean,
Yeah.
just to send
A
a
lot of red flags.
I can always look back and say, darn, I wish I'd done this, I wish I'd done that.
No,
It
but
was
the point is that
interest-
he had these drawings and he brought them in, and so why wouldn't you, they had, I don't know, it wasn't
Well,
like.
there are very
No.
specific protocols that counseling offices have to use,
Yeah.
and often they'll bring in SROs to also make sure that the legal processes are followed. And when it's an underage kid and the parent, it's very complicated. It's not as cut and dried as, let's send him home for the day.
Yeah,
unfortunately.
yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
and that's,
yeah, for sure, right?
that's what
I
we're
saw
thinking. It'd make a good class to do that. And for those who don't know, Carrie is a counselor at Smoky Hill High School and knows and could share with us about the situation in high school. So, but Karen, go ahead and then we're gonna start.
I
on the-
saw,
today.
I saw part of a news clip, with the Michigan, I don't know if it was the House or the Senate or their combined group. And some of the sentiment was from those that support the gun side of it were like, oh, what can we do? And so this person, part of the group, got up and said, there's a lot we can do. And she went through a whole litany of things that we could do. And after each one of them, it was, should we choose to do that, there's a lot we can do.
Yeah,
So I wish I would have, it was just one of these like passing blips, but it was very poignant. And I thought she was spot on
yeah,
as she was calling them, basically calling them out. So it's almost
Good.
like with the shooting that happened down in Florida, and the people in offices were sending our thoughts and prayers, that whole kind of line. And it's like, we don't want your thoughts and prayers, this
Yeah.
is what we want.
yeah.
I mean, it just really,
There's a real pushback against
real
that phrasing
pushback.
today.
Yes.
Mhm.
Do something.
Yeah, because it really doesn't translate
It's
into
nice to
action.
say, oh, yes, we're,
We're
our
sorry.
thoughts and prayers
Yeah,
are
we're
with you.
sorry, right?
And
yeah.
they're like,
But we don't want to do anything to change the
No.
status
Yeah.
quo.
right, what
They
an
could do this.
empty phrase.
They could do some of the exact same things that they're attempting to do with abortion rights.
Exactly.
You know, unborn babies are everything, but once they're born, it's okay to shoot at them in schools. So,
Yes, okay.
Kids must be really fearful in school. nowadays.
it can be, there are days, it's uncomfortable.
Okay, well, you've given us a good indication that we do want to discuss this more in the future, and we will do that. Before we go on, I wanted to mention that one of our former class members has passed away, Bob Davis.
Oh,
Shirley and Bob Davis are in their 90s, and they used to come here regularly, and they moved to Nebraska, I think. And it was in the bulletin today that Bob passed away. So our thoughts and prayers are with them today, as we say. Okay. And now Ron is going to give us a good presentation. I'm going to hit share screen here so that Ron's presentation comes up on the screen. And Terry, can you see that okay on Zoom? Is it sharing the screen? Good, okay.
That's nice.
That's fine.
That's a good one. So take it away, Ron.
Alrighty. Well, a lot of things going on in the world. And of course, last week we talked on Fiona Hill's book, and this double set lesson is based on it. She indicated that the key theme of her book was opportunity, and how opportunity is being on the decrease in this country. All righty. We also talked last week a good bit about some of the anti-democracy things we were seeing and some of the danger signs. There's a good book, Global White Nationalism, from apartheid to Trump. And some of the danger signs that make your country vulnerable to a misbehaving populist are things like your country being divided by post-industrial decline, loss of mining and manufacturing jobs, economic crises. Good example was the 2008-2009 recession that we had, shrinking opportunity, lack of socio-economic mobility, and recent and rapid demographic change. Okay, in a nutshell, we better address the forgotten issues. Polarization and populism have close companions, and those close companions are extremism and authoritarianism. These two factors can emerge if your polarization and your populism go out of control and go off the rails. And as we mentioned, populists and authoritarians usually hone in on a person or a group responsible to blame, be it Jews, blacks, immigrants, liberals, whatever. There's a good book out right now by Adam Schiff, Midnight in Washington, How We Almost Lost Our Democracy and Still Could. Also this week in the news, Jeff Clark was subpoenaed to appear before the commission. And it now looks like not only did Trump call the state of Georgia election officials saying, find me another 11,800 some votes, but they were also working up drafts from the Justice Department to send to swing states declaring that the department was examining election problems, it's the Justice Department, and advising state legislators to consider appointing new electors. Here's an article, and this has just popped up in the last couple days. So it's worse than we thought.
Who was the AG at the time?
I'll have to look. They were passing the ball and reappointing. Was it Rosen or? Yeah,
Was it Barr?
might have been Barr at that time. Okay. We're going to quickly touch on the two coups, as I call them, the attempted Trump coup. And we mentioned last week, Trump declaring voter fraud, trying to harass, harangue, and do whatever he can, now sending even messages out, trying to turn the election in key states, telling them to throw out their electors and put in his guys. Of course, instructing Mike Pence to try to block the election. So this thing went way beyond just a challenge of a close election in some state. It was an all-out attempt to subvert the election by any means necessary, including illegal means. We're going to draw an analogy to a coup that happened in the Soviet Union in 1993. There was a bitter dispute between the Russian parliament and President Boris Yeltsin over competing drafts of a new constitution for Russia. The Duma, that was their legislature, refused to confirm Yeltsin's prime minister, and the Duma prepared to impeach Yeltsin. But Yeltsin declared extraordinary powers, called out the Russian militaries to shell the parliament with tank fire.
Wow.
And there's a picture, it's pretty small, you can't see it very well, but they actually fired a couple artillery shells into their Congress.
Oh,
so that's what you call taking force. So this was even a step beyond Trump's riotous group after our Capitol on January 6th. Putin actually and his cronies actually had tanks lob a few shells into the Duma. Putin grabbed a female space hero there in Russia, Valentia Tereshkova, a Duma deputy, and had her, because she was very popular, kind of a hero, a Neil Armstrong type, to remove the term limits for Putin and increase his presidential powers. Of course, he was successful in doing so. Anybody remember the Rocky and Bullwinkle? Remember this little carrot? Boris Badenov, yeah.
Boris.
Okay. All right. To some extent, we all live in our own little bubbles. John Travolta played in a movie called The Boy in the Bubble. This was a good 30 years ago or more. There's a comic book cover showing the Justice League members getting caught in their own bubble. Let's move on down here. We also looked at this slide last week about the Rust Belt, looking at where the Rust Belt was worse. And we also want to point out another issue outside of the Rust Belt, or in the rural areas predominantly of the Rust Belt. There's a tremendous upsurge of drug issues in the more rural areas of the Rust Belt. Today, the rural America has higher rates of alcohol abuse, tobacco use, and methamphetamines than the big city. So the problem with meth is actually worse with white kids by far than it is with kids in the inner city. And here's a poster that was put together by the Ross County, Ohio Farm Bureau. We're trying to do something. We're now going to talking about the Rust Belt. We mentioned the song "We Got to Get Out of This Place." We're going to try to play a segment of that real fast here, just for a moment of humor. This was a song by a British rock group. Just listen to it, but it goes on. We got to get out of this place.
In this studio part of the city, where the sun refused to shine, people tell me there ain't no use in trying. Now, my girl, you're so young and pretty. One thing I know is true. You'll be dead before your time is due. I know. Watch my daddy bedtime. Watch his hand been turning gray. He's been working and slaving his life away. Oh yes, I know. He's been working so hard. I've been working too, baby. Every night and day. We gotta get out of this place. If it's the last thing we ever do, we gotta get out of this place. There's a better life for me and you.
All righty, again, a British rock group. And that song reminds me very much of the small town that Fiona Hill had to leave, Bishop Auckland, and a British rock group polarized that song. There was also a song done by Billy Joel. We're working here in Allentown.
Yes.
Does anybody remember that one?
Yes.
And that's another song that very much fits the Rust Belt theme. Okay, so we talked about the problems. Here's a chart that shows where young college graduates are tending to move. The states in the blue and the purple are seeing a net in-migration of college graduates. The states in the orange or tan zones are seeing a net out-migration rate. Notice the Midwest, the quote Rust Belt areas. They're seeing a net out migration of their college graduates, particularly in some of the science and technical skills.
What does the purple mean? As you go to.
Purple means
Moving in.
a net in migration rate. More college graduates come from the University of
Okay,
Delaware and come here,
right.
whereas people are migrating out of places like Kent State, Ohio State, Cincinnati, and a lot of their college graduates are leaving.
Well, what's in Illinois,
Wow.
where they're
Michigan.
migrating to Illinois?
I can't answer that. Chicago area probably seeing a pretty good. Okay, we're going to really look at wealth inequality real fast. I'm going to first put up this chart. This shows the wealth. There's wealth and there's income. Wealth is how much you have in your entire estate, your home, your properties, your stocks, everything. Your income is what you're seeing as a direct inflow into your checking account on a monthly, yearly basis. But we can see the trend is not good. Those numbers are small, but this chart runs from 2000, year 2000 to the year 2020. And we can see the total wealth of the top 1% is growing. In fact, the share of the top 1% increased from 23% to 32% between 1989 and 2018. So it's roughly a 30-year period. That's almost a 10% increase in the amount of wealth owned by the top 1%. The next 9%, this is the people with 2 to 10% of America's wealth, pretty much stayed even. The next 40% went down, and the lower 50%, their numbers are so small that they hardly show up on the graph. In other words, and they show on the second chart, if the United States was divided up according to wealth, the top 1% would own that big chunk in the left upper corner. The next 9% would own most of Eastern United States. Then the next 30% would own that strip you see that includes Florida. 20% would own part of southern Texas, and 40% would own that dot. So it definitely shows you that wealth isn't evenly divided. Here's a chart that shows it graphically. The top 1% is this dark blue line. The top 1 to 10% is the orange line. But you can see that those two groups, the top 1% and the top 1 to 10%, definitely own a good part of America.
So that was the trickle down years, and it shows the exact opposite.
Yeah.
It wasn't trickle down.
Yeah.
Even remotely.
Right,
You know.
right.
Also, just in the last 2 years, the US super rich, and they call the super rich just 719 people, saw their collective wealth increase 50% since mid-March of 2020. So that's just in the last 18 months.
My gosh.
So it shows that our economy and the pandemic has done things to definitely tilt things, and the inequality is unfortunately getting worse. Okay, you can look up in the left-hand column in this chart your birth year, and this shows you the probability, if you were born in these years, of your owning and having more income than your parents. And you can see if you were born in 1940, you're almost a sure bet to have outdone your parents. If you were born in, like me, 1951, we've got almost an 80% chance of having more income than our parents. But you can see the numbers are falling away. If you were a kid born in 1980, you've only got a 50-50 chance of, as Billy Joel said in his song Allentown, making more than your old man did. So that inequality problem is significant.
Well, that's the way it's been in America. In all of its development, is that the younger generation could look forward to having a better life than the previous generation.
Yeah, but that has changed.
In the 1930s, the automobile industry was very strong unionized, and they had these sit-down strikes to get higher wages. And then the union movement broadly was doing very well. In fact, their downfall in popularity in the nation was they got excessive in their demands. They were calling for increases when they weren't justified because the companies were not making as much money. So that's our problem now, is we don't have enough union strength in the country. But I think it will come back.
Yes.
But it'll be more realistic in what they ask. In fact, corporations, if they were smart, they would have a couple of their laborers on their board of directors, so the union, the workers, would know what the condition of the company is, whether or not, this is not a time to ask for a raise, to wait for a time when our company is doing better.
Yeah. Union participation is now less, it's less than 10%, I'm sure.
Really?
Yeah. This next chart, by the way, shows income. This is not wealth, but income by racial groups.
I want to
go back to that question about the unions. I didn't mean to
Good.
interrupt.
Sure.
But a lot of those unions represent employees or employers who are in the Rust Belt. And I think when there's less and less, I mean, you've got the airline industry and some of these big industries that are still have an input from a union. But a lot of those unions, the John Deere factory that was on and the Kellogg, these are in the industrial areas, which tend to be in the Rust Belt areas.
Yes.
And I agree with what you're saying. I think that companies, if they were smart, takes a little bit of work, but do a pay for performance. So if we're doing well, because all of you who are working on the line did this, that, or the other thing, there's a portion of our revenue, our profit, that's what I want to say, that can be part of yours. But it's not set up like that.
Yeah, unfortunately, the data shows that a higher percentage of the money is going to super top executives and shareholders, not to wages of the average worker. But setting us up for another lesson in the future, notice the difference between white America and Black America in terms of average income. There's a huge gap. And this is the gap in income. The gap in wealth is, I think, even worse. So Black America is at a huge disadvantage. Raw capitalism is often heartless because of globalization, technology, deregulation. The benefits of economic growth have largely been captured by people at the top. 1975, a typical man, a little sexist there, with a high school degree, could support a family of 4 at double the poverty line. So average wage for a guy in 75 was double the poverty line wage. Now, the average wage only clears the poverty line by 40%. And that's with 34,000 annual earnings. Okay, so it's a tough world out there.
Well, another, if I may mention, another thing that businesses are doing currently, and was a big factor in the John Deere strike, is that the manufacturers are limiting the capability of their products to be repaired. And farmers particularly are angry because their machines that are being turned out, they can't be repaired by themselves. Farmers have a pride in that they fix their own farm machinery.
That's true.
Now they can't do it. And some manufacturers will not replace parts, or they will not repair. You can't even send it back to them to repair. They want you to buy a new one.
Oh my gosh.
So some of the things that the industry is doing is not good in the long range economy.
Okay. So clearly a challenge we have, and this is what worries politicians, economists, people all over the world, is will our evolving society with increased automation, robotic manufacturing, powerful software, be able to employ enough people with adequate benefits? And we just got a warning message such that we better put some juice on this.
Right.
Okay. So a new world's arrived. This chart notes that Amazon employs 600,000 employees at minimum or lower wages. GM at its peak had almost 850,000 people worldwide and 600,000 in the US. Today, Microsoft and Apple combined employ less than a third of the people that GM did. Again, it just shows how heavy manufacturing industry and their employment rates have become something in the past. Okay, a book we've used and a good bit of today's lesson, or will use, is The Vanishing American Dream. This is based on a conference that was done at Yale University about 2 years ago. And they brought together a bunch of experts to say, well, what can we do about it? How do we attack this Rust Belt problem? And of course, it's more than just a Midwest Rust Belt problem. It's a problem of small towns, rural areas all over the country. Even if you look at Colorado, even in the 1990s and the 2000s, the counties down there in I call it the melon counties, down in the southeast corner, where some of those have been losing population. A lot of rural counties in Colorado have been losing population, losing employment opportunities. And it's not just the Midwest Rust Belt. Fiona's key questions for politicians: what are you trying to do? What are your goals? What do you do to achieve them? What's the appropriate scale of funding and the right mechanism? Are you focusing just on short-term relief or doing things that will reduce inequalities and try to make things better for future generations? Fiona's, again, the number one theme of her book is assure that there is a broad infrastructure of opportunity. And opportunity requires both individual actions and attitudes and state and federal programs. And she also says, recognize that race is the single most formidable obstacle to opportunity in our country. So let's look at some of the solutions. The number one item that Fiona puts forth in her book is education. She says in the book, finding a good paying job in the 21st century will be almost impossible without some form of high school education, a 2-year or 4-year degree, or an apprenticeship or specialized training. She said high school education isn't enough. You need some specialized training, an apprenticeship, something. And her argument is we must massively open up education to the broad middle class. And she said, if you look at China with its 1.4 billion people, that's 4 times our population, they are working hard investing in human capital. And they've moved millions from rural to urban areas between 2000 and 2010. That's a decade-old data. It was creating a 1 million strong city equivalent every month in China. If we want to compete with China, then we must lift up all our population, not just the elite few. So we've really got to get our act together so that we have colleges and specialized training, technical school.
So they're lifting up their middle class much more than we are.
Right. This shows the debt level.
Can I say something for a minute there?
Fire away.
I came from Northern Illinois, and what happened through, I'm gonna say into the 60s, unions ran apprenticeship programs. Between the 60s and middle 75, businesses took over the apprenticeship programs. And unions gave up teaching people in apprenticeship programs. Right now in the mid Rust Belt areas, small businesses have asked the states to create apprenticeship training, and the taxpayers have refused to have the government do apprenticeship programs, and there would be tens of thousands of jobs in those areas if someone would create apprenticeship programs in which small businessmen cannot afford to do on their own.
May I say something here about that, please?
Sure.
When I ran for office, I visited a whole bunch of unions and observed their local in Colorado apprenticeship programs, and they are remarkable. They are absolutely amazing. And what was really interesting to me is that the manufacturers of various tools would donate to the union's apprenticeship programs so that the apprentices were learning on the latest tools in existence. So we have but our schools are not publicizing, not letting people know that these wonderful apprenticeship programs exist at the unions.
I'm
Okay.
not talking about Colorado.
I understand. I'm
It's
just
the
saying
Rust
that
Belt areas.
I
Emma
understand.
Griffith School, for example, in Denver is doing apprenticeship programs. I know people right now that are learning plumbing and a number of programs, which is supported by Colorado is an exception, but we're talking about the Rust Belt areas. The
all
Front
I'm
Range
saying
has
is,
more jobs than there are people to fill them right now.
all I'm saying is that the AFL-CIO, for example, is an amalgamation of a number of unions that have good apprenticeship programs in existence, and they should be spreading them and making sure that people throughout the country have access to them and are aware of them.
Okay, that is Julia Barnell Sargent, for those who don't see her picture on the screen, who ran for a public office here in Douglas County a couple years ago.
Thank you, Julia.
Yeah. All righty. Looking at this chart, this shows this how much student debt has increased, college student debt between 2007 and 2020. It's increased from an average of $15,000 per student to now over $36,000. It's tripled since 2006. It said it's especially among Blacks, 60% of Black students who started college didn't finish within 6 years, and debt and family issues were key factors. I'm going to go back, touching on my roots. I would be in a terrible position today if it hadn't been for good, low-cost education. Here's a picture of my house that I grew up in. I'm this house was about 800 square feet. There were 6 of us living in there, my parents and 4 siblings. My bedroom was on the right corner of that house. It was less than 10 feet from the curb.
Oh,
That means auto exhaust, and even people walking down the street, I could hear them talking. I think my brother and I shared a bedroom that was 10 feet by 15 feet. Yeah. What saved my hide, you can see the high school over across my backyard. There was fortunately a good high school, so I had access to a good high school. And I was within 10 miles of the University of Cincinnati. And I also, in college, I was in an engineering co-op program. So I went up to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, and by the government, US Air Force, I was a co-op with the US Air Force, and they paid me some money to get some training there while I was a college student to supplement my engineering degree. And I'll flat out say, I would have been a cooked goose if it had not been for these opportunities. The university being nearby, because my parents paid not a dime of my tuition, my books, my transportation, money for clothing, gas money, or anything else. Yeah, it was, yeah.
Ron, are you gonna talk about the web before the 18th?
The what again?
Are you gonna talk about the web launching?
Oh,
Telescope before the 18th?
it's now the 22nd that they're planning
Oh,
on
is
launching
that right?
the James
But,
Webb Telescope.
yeah,
It's been pushed back a few days.
Yeah, it's gonna
Okay.
be 100 times more powerful than the Hubble.
Mhm.
And, yeah.
Okay, yeah, we'll,
Yeah, because it's so tremendous.
okay.
Thing.
Well,
and Ron worked on that.
yes.
Yeah, I know, he has an interest in it.
Okay,
Thank you, Ron.
all right.
But we do have people such as Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren keep talking about education and what we need to do to help people get their education. We've got to do something. without people like me having to go and work part-time at the university in order to, I'd go to one window, pick up my pay and take it to the next window to pay for my tuition. So, you know, we've got to do something that helps more people be able to have the education that's needed in this country.
Yeah. My first quarter engineering tuition in 1969 was just a little over $300. And a couple of my books were like $15 to $18 a piece. Now, granted, there's inflation, but very affordable.
In the late 1940s, it was a little bit less.
Okay.
20 years ago.
This is Terry. I got one granddaughter that's a sophomore in college. I got 2 seniors in high school that are going to college. Do you know that 80% of college costs is in the dorms and staying on campus? 80% of the cost, and you're required to do that your first 2 years. This is where you can look it up. This is where CSU makes all its money, is requiring students for the first 2 years to stay on campus, and is 80% of CU's income.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. Okay, US population with a college degree. The ladies, by the way, have taken the lead. Too many men are not going to college. It's a problem. Okay, so Fiona's solution is, she said not only does college and technical and apprenticeship training need to be heavily subsidized, if not free, she said universal early childhood education needs to be made available. And there are some things happening in even the Build Back America bill to try to make that happen. Also, since there are so many single moms in the United States, we need, and two worker households, we need to subsidize national child care networks to help women get back in the workforce. We need some free community college, very low tuition or free higher level college. And Fiona says we should target to increase those with high quality credentials. This means an apprenticeship, a couple of years of college, or special technical training, or a 4-year degree from its current 46% level to get it up to about 65%. Boost it up another 50%. This is what most economists think the job market will require by 2030. Okay, we touched on education. We're going to talk about some of the other things. Go ahead.
Quick comment. My own personal view, I totally agree with that. But there's another factor that I've seen when raising our 3 kids that is not talked about in any books that I've seen, and it's motivating. Motivation, inspiration of the children. How many children, it's huge, that have struggled with that, and they come out with degrees and they still don't have anything. Because they haven't seen how to apply it, they are not motivated, they just get the degree, they just come out, they're not
There's
driven.
no transition,
They're not driven to
figure it out.
to say, okay, I want a degree because I want to do this, and I want to, you know, there's that we talked
Yeah.
about it when we were raising our kids, saying, how do we motivate and inspire these, you know?
There's also oversupply degrees.
Right.
There's probably too many people getting degrees in psychology, sociology, liberal arts, and I'm not knocking these fields. It's just that you got to pick something that's employable. If you get a degree in Egyptian archaeology, good luck trying to find a job. You know, it's
Plus the cost of the education
Right.
Right.
is beyond what the salary will be. So a lot of students are weighing that and saying, why do it if I can't even make back what it's costing me
Right.
to go? So
Totally.
there's a lot of factors.
Struggle with all that.
Yeah.
we also need, Fiona said in their book, physical infrastructure investment. Fortunately, a big infrastructure bill was passed. generally, we've seen that investments in infrastructure have paid off. The interstate highway system, they said, if you want to see where America is going to grow in the next 30 years, just look at the interstate highway systems. And it'll give you a pretty good clue. You can hardly afford now to build your factory or even set your employer location up at a location that's not within the interstate highway network. So there's another one. Whoops. More suggestions for the US. Let's see.
Train more doctors.
Expand affordable health care, train more doctors, force more pharmaceutical price competition. A lot of things can be done in the medical, since medical is like, what, like 18% of the US gross national product? Yeah, if we can get it more efficient, get pharmaceutical pricing down, do some other things, that would help a good bit.
Lower the price of CT scanners. I'm putting one in right now in Moab's $1.7 million.
One, gosh.
Yeah.
Fiona Hill also suggested that we need to oversee equity programs to remove racial barriers and close women's wage gaps. Fiona talks about when she took government jobs in the US and Washington area, how the women were definitely given lower salaries than men with the same credentials. In fact, she said it wasn't considered proper for women to negotiate for higher offers. If a woman balked and said, I think I deserve a little more, they would be classed as an uppity, pushy woman and looked down upon.
If we have more women CEOs in companies, will that change much? Or will it still be?
So
I think that would help. And Julie and I can say, having looked at the aerospace industry, where we spent a good bit of our careers, we saw some significant progress being made in that area.
Yeah, it's entirely possible, but there's a lot of negative ones too. Carly Fiorina ruined Hewlett Packard for many years.
Okay.
Their headquarters was about 2 miles from our home on the Stanford campus. So
Yeah, good point.
she really wrecked it.
Okay.
What he said,
What
what
did
did
he
he
say?
say?
He said that basically, paraphrase,
Carly Fiorina ruined HP. I watched it happen.
yeah, he gave an example of a woman who ruined HP.
Yeah. So
Proving-
I think having some more of them on boards of directors, as well as more CEO, make it possible to have them and CEOs, but Carly was bad news. So it's not 100%, example of one example doesn't prove anything, but
Right.
Yeah, she did make some bad.
Okay, this also another thing we needed to do is push to get more and better and faster internet access into small town and rural areas. Here's a chart that you probably can't read, but this shows the internet usage penetration data as of November, the end of 2019. Colorado was #1, and that number that you can't read is 88.26%. The second state.
Households in Colorado that have internet, or what's the statistic? It's 87% of the households in Colorado that have internet.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So we've got the highest in the country. Utah was second, New Hampshire, District of Columbia, Minnesota, Iowa. Some
Where's
states on the
Ohio?
bottom.
What's on the bottom?
And on the bottom is North Carolina, Mississippi, New York, and Tennessee. Interesting. You can look this up, but small percentage differences make a lot. 1 in 4 North Carolinians does not have this internet access.
Colorado has a savings plan for college education, it's tax-free. Do you have any comment about those? Are those plans a wise investment?
Colorado having what?
Savings.
Oh,
plan
savings
For
plans.
education, it's
Okay.
tax-free, you know, like
Yeah,
grandparents want to do it for their grandchildren.
okay.
You know, I was wondering if that's a wise way to save,
It's-
and.
It's not in every state and it won't do you, it's good, but it won't help you if your grandparents don't have money.
Yeah,
And for a tremendous numbers of Black families,
Mhm.
there's no
Yeah,
No
that's
inheritance
generational
coming
wealth,
down.
yeah.
From prior generations. That's one of the huge handicaps of Black America is the fact that they have so little wealth. They didn't get land, farms,
home ownership.
Oklahoma land rush properties. There's no money coming down from the generational tree into their families to get them seed. Let's call it seed money for their families to work on.
Ron, we've got about 8 minutes
Yeah.
left.
Okay, here's a pretty good book, The Economics of Discontent. This entire book deals with things we could do to try to attack our inequality. It's got some pretty radical ideas in it. Consider paying college-educated moms a stipend for a multi-year maternity leave. She said we need more, quote, better educated, smarter moms to bring some kids into the world. And it said we need to reduce incentives for illegal immigrants from poor countries. She said, we can't, this book says, we can't as a country take all the tired, the sick, the poor, and not have some border controls. So that's a hot button. We also maybe need to do some things to increase taxes on vacant dwellings held for speculative purposes to try to control the incredible rise in cost of housing. Relocation. Fiona points out in the mid-60s, Australia was so trying to get good quality people into their country, they would pay you to be to come there.
Expatriate.
Yeah, they would pay your airfare, give you a little bit of stipend. And she had some family members that said, yeah, we're in a poor area of North England, we'll take you up on that. And they ended up with some of those jumping that. It looks like in America, we may have to accept the fact that some people are gonna have to get help getting out of some of these depressed areas. Free moving. We may have to give people help relocating. May not be able to bring back Cairo, Illinois. Also, reform healthcare so that people can move to new opportunities. A lot of people are stuck in a certain job or something, and they can't move up because they'll lose their healthcare. Okay, I've talked too much today. Also, we'll finish it up with this one. Family allowances, direct payments to poor families for food stamps, childcare, or income credit. This shows government spending for, they now call it SNAP, supplemental nutrition is the new name instead of food stamps. But it does look like America needs food stamps to help the poor. And then, of course, she talks about contacts, and we could go quite a bit away. So with that, I talked too much. The question arises, do we take a laissez-faire approach and just say, let the economy do its thing? Dayton, Ohio will come back by itself if we just leave it alone. We shouldn't try to do anything, just let the free economy take care of things? Or do we need to say, no, the government must step in and take some pretty aggressive action to try to combat economic inequality, areas that are hurting big time? Thoughts?
I'd like to see comparisons between the US and other countries, some of the European countries, South American countries. What are they doing to solve their social injustice problems? And why do we have to reinvent the wheel every 4 years? Why not go with historical data and see what some of these other nations are doing to solve their social economic problems, because we're certainly not number one in inequality. As much as the state of Wyoming would like to think they are, we're just not.
We're not number one in much of anything anymore, are we?
Are we what again?
Are number one in much of anything anymore.
We're still a great country. A lot of.
Oh, yeah, we're a great country, but we've let things slide.
Yeah, we have.
I think a bigger.
I think I'd like to know, what is our role as believers in that Jesus who said to feed the hungry and to heal the sick? What is it we are called to do, both in influencing our government and in having an impact in the world that we directly touch?
Yeah, that's an awesome question, Julia. And there's certainly separation between church and state, what our governments can do if they call themselves a Christian nation versus what we can do as Christians sitting in this room if we want to be a part of that. That's a great question.
See, that's one of the reasons I ran for office, is
Yeah.
because I felt like, as somebody who believes in something, maybe there was a place for me in government to help nudge our government to be more compassionate.
Well, Julie, I can tell you, I wasn't here when you ran for office, but typically if I see a person who is running for office and has a Christ symbol, a fish symbol, or a cross on their name as running for office, I will absolutely dismiss you as a candidate.
Oh, absolutely. I'm in the same place. I don't use the term Christian for me anymore because it has been so badly polluted. I use follower of Jesus.
Exactly, yes.
Because you'd never know what it really means.
That's
for
right.
that.
That's right. I will not buy a product. I will not vote for a candidate that uses the word Christianity in their logo whatsoever. I
Interesting.
automatically dismiss them.
Huh.
And I promise you I did not.
Now, if you had to put a union logo on your bumper sticker, I absolutely would vote.
I had the endorsement of 5 unions.
Great.
Great.
And when you put forth ideas and policy propositions, those kinds of things that show that you value those compassionate works of Christ, that's very different than just putting the cross on your propaganda, right?
Right.
So look to those values that are being put forth in the policies and the ideas of how to govern more compassionately, to use your term.
Yeah.
Those are things that I look
When
for.
Mike Lindell, the pillow guy, went to sell his pillows on TV, and he always wore that cross to sell his pillows, I knew he was a fraud. I absolutely knew he was a fraud, and he's proven that.
Well, because Jesus wouldn't have done that. One thing I think we need to watch out for is that all of this we heard is tied to education. And
Yes.
what has just happened in our election for school board is something that we're going to have to keep an eye on, this new school board, because they are going to try to move from the neighborhood public free finance schools and give all the money to private voucher programs. That is something that they have committed to do.
Exactly.
And I think we're going to have to keep our eyes very, as a community, this is one of the areas that we are going to have an impact.
This is the Douglas County School Board you're talking about. Yeah.
That's
But it's
correct.
Nationwide,
Yes.
it's happening nation. There is a concerted effort to devalue public schools.
And that's what we talked about, Ron, at our men's meeting on Tuesday. It's another institution that's being attacked to destroy democracy. It's a sign that we have to be vigilant of.
Well, we're about out of time too.
When are the school board meetings?
Look on their websites. They'll be on the websites, and a lot of them are live streamed. You can watch them on the web. Yeah, that's helpful today. Good discussion, everybody. Thank you, Ron. This was another good contemporary topic for us. We will follow up with more in the future.
Thank you.
Okay. Any final thoughts? You know what I wonder about too, talking about politics, is how's the status quo ever going to change in Congress? Just being so polarized, each side just wanting to win and keep power and
I
not
think
work
there's a
together.
terrible discrepancy between when they run polls across the nation and say, the one on abortion, I think it was 70% of the people are okay with abortion and want to keep that
Yes,
option in place.
yes.
Yet we're being driven or dictated by 50 people, or the people that are in Congress, what, 538 people between the two houses.
Vocal minority.
You're dictated by a handful of white men.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
and same way with the.
To represent a minority
Who represent a minority,
Right,
of Americans, the
Yeah.
majority
Right,
number of
right,
Americans.
right.
to not follow their constituents and take rights away from women.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really what it's about.
I don't know.
So the
Great
thing
question.
with abortion is made me so crazy. I'm like, I think all men should recuse themselves from women's
That's a
health
good point too.
and let women duke it out amongst themselves about what the law should be.
Then you've
I
got Amy Barrett, then you've got
absolutely-
Amy Barrett that was a part of that.
I know,
Tragedy.
duke it out with her. I just think men have no place in women's health. I just don't think they do. I don't think male doctors, I think women should decide for themselves, women's health issues. When you look at some of the states that are putting these abortion laws in place and they have these big signings and all this stuff, it's 90% white men.
Right.
Or 90% men, and I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Trying to dictate women's health? It just makes me crazy.
I would
Good
highly
topic.
recommend Melinda Gates' book called The Power of Lift.
The power of lift.
Mhm. It's all about lifting women up. And she speaks in that book a lot about women having bodily autonomy and how little it takes to really understand and help women globally,
Right.
not just in, but if there's other topics, it's really an excellent book.
Let's do an hour on abortion and women's rights.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That
I
would
think
be
that would be
Interesting.
very
Her book would be a
timely.
great one
Yeah.
to maybe
Okay.
look to.
We'll do that.
And I think we need one of you ladies to do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm the last person that should
Yeah.
be teaching that
Right.
class.
I was just thinking that. Find a lady to-
Yeah, Carrie, you should put them up there and co-do it.
Yeah.
Okay, well, they try and talk them into it.
She got a very strong opinion.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you for today.
Thank you, Ron.
Okay.
It's
We'll
called
see you.
The
Care.
Take
The
care.
Power of Lift,
Lift.
like lifting up
LIFT.
girls and women.
Melinda Gates,
Yeah, it's really very good.
thank you.
Mhm.
Okay.
But Steve, you have a good point. How do you get rid of the partisan politics? How can you, that's drives so much of what you're talking about.
Yeah, so much of it is the